some sense of it all, but I can see it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? 'Cause I don't think that I can take anymore. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. And, I don't have my setup all set up. The Board of Peace is formalized at Davos. It's going to be early in the show. We're going to do our grab bag of governance because Greenland is a big story. Davos is a big story. Trump's speech yesterday is a big story. He calls Canada out. I think we're going to get to that in the free show. Board of Peace was formalized at Davos. I think Trump had his own event at Davos and invited a bunch of different world leaders. It's all got the branding of Board of Peace. And this is important. Why is this important? Because Trump is trying to replace the broken G7, I think is broken, NATO, United Nations model, and replacing it with something that is actually functional and will prevent conflicts rather than funding the conflicts, I think, fundamentally. And so that's interesting. At least it's something different. At least this is not more of the same. We'll see. We'll see how it works out. I'm not sure. It might be good, might be great, or it might not be. Who knows? So that's interesting. We'll see about that. UK is putting up migrants in military barracks. That seems like a bad idea. That seems just like on its face a bad idea. Greenland deal is done or close to done. And that's interesting to me. The deal seems watered down, but Trump seems happy with it, so we'll see. We'll see if the deal that I've seen is actually the deal that gets action. But as I've said, Trump seems to be enthusiastic. So he's tweeting about it or whatevering about it. And so there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we got to talk about trade as well. People are responding to Carney's speech. There's all sorts of really closely related stories, all dealing with Carney's speech, Trump's speech, the fallout, and so on and so forth. Somebody was saying Carney's like Jerry Maguire, and he put on this really great speech, and he's like, "All right, who's coming with me?" And everybody just kind of stayed seated. So just us then, because we're forced to. Unfortunate. Lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Cosman says, we're doing our grab bag of governance, as I mentioned. Cosman says, my American friends need to realize that Canadians are subject to a near constant stream of North Korea-level leader worship propaganda, courtesy of a media monopoly that exists primarily to launder, amplify, and protect the Liberal Party of Canada and its interests. But not just the Liberal Party of Canada, the Uniparty, because the Conservatives are part of that Uniparty, and sometimes it benefits the media to highlight the Conservatives in a way that is not terrible all the time, etc. And so it's a very uniparty thing. But yeah, here's some examples. And I showed some examples yesterday of the world responding to Mark Carney's speech. And here's another best speech by a world leader in a very long time. Carney's Davos address draws global attention. And we're not going to see highlights like this from Trump's speech, but Trump's speech was an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes, something like that. And his speech, I think, was better than Mark Carney's speech, but Canadian media won't tell you that, right? Here's another one with Macron, Carney and Macron, and Carney's posture again looks terrible. Mark Carney's Davos speech is a manifesto of free people. Here's what else the world was saying. Manifesto, eh? What an interesting word to use when describing Mark Carney's speech, manifesto. Holly Doan is highlighting Chrystia Freeland, and Ezra Levent caught up to Chrystia Freeland, and holy cow, she looks awful. She looks like she's ill or something like that. She's been to a buffet, one buffet too many. I don't know what's going on, but this is a bad look for Chrystia Freeland. Ezra is dogged, and he follows her for 9 minutes, and she gets frustrated, and he says, you're on both sides of the Ukraine deal. You were dealing with the Ukrainians as a Ukrainian, and you were dealing with Canadians as a Canadian. You're a chameleon, right? And so it's one of those things where, yeah. And she said, I did nothing wrong. Right? Holly Doan's reporting. XMP Chrystia Freeland says she behaved ethically at every moment. She's worried about that $500 fine and the slap on the wrist. She is. She's very worried about it. I don't know why. It has no teeth, right? It's like cutting the tag off the pillow, right? It says this, you can't do this. It's illegal. It's like the FBI warning at the beginning of a movie, right? Absolutely toothless. So she behaved ethically at every moment. for fear of the ethics commissioner in accepting a job as advisor to Zelensky while acting as a parliamentary secretary overseeing Canadian aid to Ukraine. You're on both sides of the deal, madam. And she says, no, I wasn't. But she was, right? And so it's interesting that she is so upset. We'll just play a little bit of this just because it's worthwhile. Here's a bit.
Ms. Freeland, why didn't you disclose your job offer from Ukraine to the Conflict of Ethics Commissioner within 7 days as required?
Hi, nice to see you.
Likewise.
I disclosed it to the Ethics Commissioner immediately.
Are you sure about that? Because you didn't tell the Prime Minister for 2 days.
I told the Prime Minister as soon as I spoke to him, as soon as I could speak to him.
Why did you keep it secret from the public, though, until the President of Ukraine tweeted it out?
It wasn't finalized.
Are you sure it wasn't because you guys were shipping $2.5 billion out and it would be odd to have you on both sides of the deal?
That was a decision of the Prime Minister. And let me just say, I think Canada should be proud to support Ukraine.
Pivot.
And
But I don't think that's the question. You were on both sides of the deal is the question.
I wasn't on both sides of the deal. I actually wasn't at that meeting with the Prime Minister. But in any event, let me be very clear. Ukraine is fighting for Canada's security and for Canada's democracy.
But that doesn't, no one's disagreeing with that in our conversation.
Let me finish, please. I answered your questions very clearly.
Go ahead.
Ukraine is fighting for Canada. Ukraine is fighting for democracy in Ukraine and in the world. We benefit from supporting you.
So she's pivoting and reframing the whole question of why were you on both sides of the deal? And she said, no, I was only on the Ukrainian side. I wasn't in the deal with the room with the Prime Minister. I was in the room with Mr. Zelensky. So not on the Canadian side. And now she's trying to pivot away from being on both sides of the deal. She doesn't want to talk about that anymore. She wants to talk about Ukraine as fighting for Canadian values, which is horseshit. Melissa says, and so I'll move on from Chrystia Freeland, but Chrystia Freeland is exactly the same piece of work that she was when she was working in the Canadian government under Justin Trudeau. Melissa says, wow, GFL is a major Canadian company, and they announced today that they're moving their headquarters to Florida from Ontario. How is Doug Ford going to boycott this one? Yeah, so, if I had an opportunity to move my business down to a state, I'd think long and hard about Montana or one of the Dakotas. I think one of the Dakotas is better than the other Dakota. I'm not sure which one. But I feel like the incentives keep stacking up, and there's what about Canada now in the modern era in the last 10 years are we proud of? The RCMP, the government, the healthcare, the what? Nothing, absolutely nothing. And so if people have an opportunity, I do not blame them whatsoever if they're getting the heck out of Dodge at this point in time. National Post is underlining my point. They say fixing the province requires a full root to branch removal of the insidious ideology that the NDP has aggressively pushed into every facet of government, writes Caroline Elliott. Yeah, the elections are rigged. They don't represent us. They're globalists pretending, wearing Canadian Edgar suits. Edgar suit is a Men in Black reference. Okay, CCFR is reporting that the Barrie Police are announcing that they will not participate in the gun grab either. Barrie Police Service says on January 19th, 2026, the nationwide declaration period for the federal government's assault-style rifle or firearms compensation program began. The Barrie Police Service is not currently participating in this program and will not be offering any scheduled collection appointments. So don't even bother. We're not doing it. And keep your guns because we're not interested in your guns. That's that. So interesting. When your police are saying no, well, Doug Ford experienced this as well when he was saying that people were going to be pulled over and checked on the highway to make sure that they were able to be free to be traveling. And the police said, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not doing that. And that undermined the plans of the globalists, I'm sure. And Doug Ford was very sad. Disclosed TV, let's talk about the Board of Peace. I found this very funny. There's like 30 seconds before this of like close-up camera footage of all of the world leaders. Mark Carney's not there. Keir Starmer's not there. Hungary's there. What's his name? Orban is there. Viktor Orban's there. So that's interesting. And there are lots and lots of impactful people, right? And Trump is excited about this. Malai's there. I don't see El Salvador. And then so they announced Trump, and everybody's kind of sitting here waiting. And they announced Trump.
Please welcome the chairman of the Board of Peace, the President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
Doesn't this feel like an Apprentice episode? Please welcome the chairman of the board and president of the United States.
Please welcome the chairman of the Board of Peace, the president of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
And then he kind of runs out onto the side of the stage. It's kind of funny. Well, not runs, but stands there for a minute. Yeah.
Well, this is a very exciting day. Long in the making, and many countries have just received their notice, and everybody wants to be a part of it. And we'll work with many others, including the United Nations. But I want to thank you all for being here. Yesterday we had an incredibly successful visit with many of the world's top business leaders, the best, the biggest, most successful, and foreign heads of state. And now we have one of the most important meetings of all, the official formation of what is known as the Board of Peace.
There you go. And then Trump's press secretary oversees the signing, and they do formal ratification. And then all of these world leaders are going to sign with Trump, and this is all like part of the ceremony and stuff, right? So this is just a minute of this, and I think it's important that this is being done at Davos. Trump is doing this on purpose. This is sending a signal. This is a sign. This is a message to the other globalist world leaders.
Okay.
They're showing the signatures.
Congratulations, President Trump. The charter is now in full force, and the Board of Peace is now an official international organization. We will now continue the signing ceremonies, beginning with the President of Argentina and the Prime Minister of Armenia.
Okay, so this is a body that is meant to replace, in my opinion, the United Nations and other intranational organizations that have been ineffective at bringing peace. They have largely, and Trump went to a lot of these places and told them to their face, you are funding an invasion of the United States. That's not your role. You shouldn't be doing that. So instead of fixing it, he's making himself chairman of the Board of Peace. What's the term limit on the chairman of the Board of Peace? It's probably longer than the United States president, and it gives him a lot of power internationally. Interesting. I think Trump's going to be around after 2028, I'm telling you. And I still think he's going to be the president after 2028. I think he's going to be the president in 2028. I could be wrong. Maybe it'll be Rubio, but I don't know. But it seems like there are moves to be made, and it seems like Trump is not deterred by conventions of, history or anything like that. Inside Papers reporting just in, Secretary Rubio, this is not just a board of peace, this is a board of action, just like Trump, a president of action. Here's Rubio, I'll let him say it.
I also want to acknowledge the extraordinary leaders that are here today. This is not just a board of peace, this is a board of action. Just like President Trump is a president of action. A lot of times people like to give speeches. I've been to many of these forums, and they're not useless, and they're not, they have utility in many cases. But oftentimes in international affairs, we often find ourselves at events where people are reading these scripted statements, these strongly worded letters that they put out, but no action, nothing happens. This is a group of leaders that are about action. And the President of the United States is a president of action, of getting things done. And today is the beginning of that, of a new era and a new stage that we think is so important as a model to the rest of the world of what is possible. And clearly the focus is right now on Gaza and making sure that the plan that's about to be presented to you here today, this vision for the future of Gaza, this vision for the future of the region, is not just possible and promising. It is our destiny if we put the time and the effort that it requires, as I know this board will do. But I also think it will serve as an example of what's possible in other parts of the world. Without losing focus on what's before us now, This is what's possible for other places and other conflicts that seem impossible to solve right now.
So, I mean, action is much better than empty rhetoric that doesn't solve anything. And that's, I mean, hopefully we actually see some action. And I mean, the formation of the Board of Peace, et cetera, is action, but I'm not sure if we are going to actually see a dislodging of the ideology that has been running the world for the last 50 years at least, 1970s. Patrick says the United Kingdom will not be joining the Board of Peace today. Yvette Cooper says FS is, I can't remember what that, Foreign Secretary. Yvette Cooper says board has legal implications and the United Kingdom objects to Putin's presence. No EU state, save Hungary, joining. In the Balkans, Albania agrees to join as Jared Kushner, by absolute coincidence, gains approval for the Albanian government to build a $1.4 billion luxury resort on Sazden Island. The Gulf states joining on basis the board's mission is in line with the United Nations resolution to achieve peace in Gaza and secure a Palestinian state. Once again, Trump complicates something that was already fiendishly complicated, achieving peace in Gaza, by turning the board into his all-purpose personal vehicle to supplant the United Nations. The United Nations is corrupt and they're not actually doing anything for peace. So supplanting the United Nations might actually bring peace. Weird, right? Like, it's weird, but true. Stephen Crowder says Trump is going absolutely scorched earth in Davos. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. Oh, I will, sir. Here's a little bit longer lead up. This is what Trump said about Canada during his hour-and-a-half long speech. And the fact that we're a minor footnote should not concern us, but should be the message that we're hearing from this. Here's Trump saying, hey, Canada, smarten the F up.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. What we did for Israel was amazing, but that's nothing compared to what we have planned for the United States, Canada, and the rest of the world. We are going to build a dome like no other. Canada.
I don't know about the dome. Although I was thinking, if the Golden Dome stops the aerosol injection into the atmosphere, that would be okay. But at the same time, I'm going to need some proof. I'm going to need some evidence that they're going to actually do that. Here is this lady, and she is talking about how Mark Carney's speech was bullshit, and a whole bunch of the stuff he said was provably false. Here we go.
From my perspective, he acknowledged a truth about the world that some of us have been talking about for a few years now. So like that part's obvious. And then the bigger problem for me was the pivot to Canada and what we're doing. And I thought that was honestly a wild exaggeration and just not at all true. Like this idea that we've removed interprovincial trade barriers. We have not. This idea that we've invested in the military. We have not. There's not even appropriated funds, let alone spent funds, to get defense spending to where it needs to be. The idea that we're getting natural resources to market, that we're driving billions in investment, none of this is true. It's all talk. And so, you know, if he wants to set that bar for himself, great. But and Canadians are patient. They like what they're hearing from a style perspective. But eventually he's going to get off a plane in Ottawa, and Canadians are going to start to say, like, okay, now what? When does the rubber hit the road?
Is it all talk, Ginny, or is it work in progress?
Okay, now what? I mean, people have been saying that for a lot longer than sometime in the future, right? This whole show is now what, you guys? And so I think that it's interesting. There is no urgency in Ottawa's actions except to destroy our currency and destroy our trade relationship with the United States. And that's unfortunate. Dr. Andrea Wagner is talking about Mark Carney's speech as well. And she said, Carney's speech at the WEF invoking Havel landed harder than people realize. Havel's warning wasn't simply about communism as an ideology. It was about how any society can be cemented into a soft or hard totalitarianism when ordinary people are pressured to repeat slogans they don't believe just to stay safe, employed, and socially accepted. This is how the lie becomes infrastructure, not through tanks, but through compliance. Canada has its own version of this now. It's the compelled language, forced scripts The forced scripts, the institutional rituals where people nod along to statements they privately reject, that sex is infinitely malleable, that women and men are interchangeable categories, that merit must be subordinated to equity as defined by bureaucracy, and that the default political solution is always more administration, more surveillance, more power for the state. Freedom of speech has long died, and the most corrosive part is the moral theater, scapegoating mostly conservative white men as a class, lowering standards in the name of virtue, and calling it progress, while universities and institutions lose the capacity for honest debate. The moment truth becomes punishable and conformity becomes a job requirement, the society is already sliding, slowly, politely, and then all at once. Yeah, the conformity is already a job requirement. If you're not LGBT, then you're not actually going to be considered for the job, right? If you're white, that's that. Sorry about your luck, buddy. You're not working here. So we're already there, right? We're already at that point. And I lost where I was because I clicked the button. Scapegoating, freedom of speech has long died, and the most corrosive part is the moral theater, scapegoating mostly conservative white men as a class, lowering standards in the name of virtue and calling it progress, while universities and institutions lose the capacity for honest debate. I've already read that. The moment truth becomes punishable and conformity becomes a job requirement, the society is already sliding, slowly, politely, and then all at once. Havel's point was simple: the regime survives because people participate in the lie. The only antidote is refusing to speak what you do not believe. Canada needs less coercion dressed up as compassion and more courage to defend reality, meritocracy, and free speech before we wake up in a country where people are investigated, sanctioned, or even arrested for saying the obvious. I grew up on the slogan, "Workers of the world unite." I miss Havel. Wesley says, well said. Havel might have an opinion on the Liberal Party versus the truckers. As to the speech, I just listened entirely. Not impressed. Lots of veiled attacks. Not much clarity on action. Lots of words. I didn't learn anything I didn't know. Trump bad. Policies bad. So yeah, Carney is terrible. Terrible. Here is this lady, and I think that she gives a succinct kind of breakdown of what Trump's trying to accomplish a little bit in the first 2 minutes of this. This is a 15-minute video. We'll just listen to the first 2 minutes. That's the intro. Here we go.
Grow, baby, grow. That's the message Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent delivered at Davos. And it's the three words the global elite fear the most, because their entire system depends on managing decline. And Donald Trump and his team just invited the world to abandon the Davos model. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick wasted no time in landing the first punch.
We are in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and the Trump administration and myself, we are here to make a very clear point. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. It is what the WEF has stood for, which is export, offshore, far shore, find the cheapest labor in the world, and the world is a better place for it.
And then Donald Trump followed up a few hours ago saying that many parts of the world are being destroyed by the failed model of foreign jobs, mass migration, and green insanity. But if you listen to the mainstream media on both sides of the pond, you would think that Canada's Mark Carney is the defender of all that is good and noble. Carney's speech portrayed the stalwart Canadians and Europeans as the force which is now standing up to the great power hegemon like the United States, which has wrecked their beautiful post-war order. But here's what they didn't mention while defending their rules-based order. Since 1989, this order has given us forever wars and regime changes that have killed millions. And it's given the West a demographic collapse due to drugs, depopulation, and deindustrialization. And as for human rights, don't forget that the native populations in both Greenland and Canada were targets of forced sterilization campaigns carried out by their governments, who, by the way, are both monarchies. In Greenland, this included girls as young as 13. And here's the final irony. Overlooking Davos this week was a massive display reading "No Kings." Now, you have to laugh because, as my friend Tom Luongo said, if they meant it, they'd start freeing Greenland from the Danish monarchy. But they don't mean it. They never do. Because Carney and von der Leyen aren't selling democracy. Their speeches at Davos were the opening ad campaigns for globalism light. The same depopulation and deindustrialization agenda, just put in a smaller box. I'm Susan Koch.